Hey, Founder's Place at Home. It's Rich again, and I've got a very interesting Bible study lesson for you. At least I hope it is. And it's a little known fact about how something got its name. I want to talk a little bit about communion and where we get the name Lord's Supper. And we go all the way back to the city of Corinth, which was a first century place that you can go to today. And Corinth is one of these places that Paul traveled to around the year 51. He made some friends, stayed about a year and a half, and started a church. And then he left them and he wrote them at least two letters, although there are hints there might have been a third that we just lost forever. But he wrote them letters, which was a very common thing that Roman people did in those days to stay in touch. And so he wrote them a letter, two letters that we call First and Second Corinthians, and they're in our Bible, and it happened in Corinth. And he talks about the Lord's Supper. But here's how it goes. So Corinth, I want you to use your imaginations, is geographically small. Now take the village of Crestline, which is right outside of St. Luke's Church, and that's the size of the city of Corinth. But Corinth had 150,000 people in that. So can you imagine how tightly packed it was? And everybody knew everybody's business. And on every corner, there was an altar. On every corner. In the Roman world, they didn't have holidays. They didn't have weekends, rather. They didn't have any kind of idea of Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Rather, they would have festivals at these altars, and then they would take a break and they would have something called a supper, and then they would eat and drink and lay around and do whatever Romans would do when they celebrated together, but they would have a supper at the festival of the altar. And so it would be a supper at Apollo's temple, so it would be the Apollo's supper, or a festival at Diana's temple, and it'd be Diana's supper, or the festival at the emperor's altar, and that'd be the emperor's supper, and that's what they did. And so what Paul did is he said, when you guys come together, us Christians, and we share bread and wine, um, that's the Lord's Supper. Isn't that cool? So that's where we get the idea of Lord's Supper. It was the genius of Paul to take a Roman idea and to turn it into a Christian thing, which is what our faith does. It takes Jesus and it just infuses our world. Everything that we do, we can do now with Jesus in it. It becomes literally a faith becomes a pair of glasses through which we see every day, so that we're Christian spouses and we're Christian friends and we're the Lord's people. And he says this, in the same way, Jesus also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as oft as ye shall drink it in remembrance of me." I say that every Sunday when I'm able to stand behind the altar of St. Luke's. I say, do this in remembrance of me. And that's the final thing I want to say about this lesson today. Not only is it the Lord's Supper, it's a supper about memory, and it's a special kind of memory. Now, there's a Greek word, it's a mouthful. It's called anamnesis. You don't have to remember that. What I want you to remember is it's a special kind of memory that simply means that you remember something so well that it's present in the moment, that the past becomes present, that the present is right here. It's a memory that's so thick that the past is not past anymore, but it's right here. I sometimes think about my childhood and I'll remember things, and suddenly I am 10 years old all over again. The past is right here. I see my friends, I see my bicycle. When I ride back home to my hometown in Bessemer, I'll ride down a street I grew up on, and suddenly I'm a little boy again. And I'll bet you feel the same way. It's just sometimes the past can just come right in and be in the present. Well, that's what happens when we share the Lord's Supper. We're not merely remembering something that happened a long time ago. Jesus is with us right now in the present. So remember, friends, that's where we get the name. But more importantly, in the Lord's Supper, we meet Jesus today. Thank you, friends, and I'll see you next week for another Bible study. Have a great week.